I want to show you how I make these really cute little adorable mini quilt blocks. I've left extra fabric on the outside until I add them to my project. I've sewn them onto foundation fabric because I wanted to give them a bit of extra strength. I'm going to show you how I made these blocks my way. I just found this an easy way for me to do. A lot of my friends say that I do things completely different than how they would do them. So you decide, and I hope you enjoy. I'm using Reynolds freezer paper and I'm cutting a piece off which is 4 to 5 inches square. On the paper side, not the shiny side, I'm going to draw my template. Draw a 2.5 inch square centering the paper. On two of the opposite sides, draw a 1/2 inch line. On the remainder two, draw a 1/2 inch line in between the two drawn lines. And you should be left with a 1.5 inch square in the middle. And that's what we're going to be working with. I want to divide each side equally by 4. So in my case, it will be 3/8 inch increments. So every 3/8 inch, I'm going to put a dot. That would be 0.95 centimetres. But if you wanted to round it up to centimetres, you could do a 4 centimetre square in the middle. Now to draw the inside lines. We're going to use the marks as reference, but we're not going to cross any lines. And that's going to be the paper piecing template. The first thing I did was draw the numbers onto the template in order of the fabrics to be sewn. I want a foundation piece, but I also want to do it onto foundation fabric. This is probably not how the quilting police will do it. This is how I'm doing it, and I want to share it with you. First thing I want to do is crease all of the tiny lines on the foundation paper. So I'm taking my ruler and I'm creasing exactly on top of the line and giving that a good press. And I'm going to do that for all of the lines on the template. The first thing I need to do is press the foundation paper onto the foundation fabric, and that's where the paper is going to stay. I'm going to lift the paper up where the seam is for 1 and 2, and that's where I need to put my fabric. Always make sure that the number 1 piece of fabric is right sides facing up. I'm moving the paper and I'm sliding the fabric underneath, and now I can see that there's enough room all the way around that shape to give me a seam allowance. I'm pressing the foundation paper back down. So that's fabric number 1 done. Now I need to sew on the line between numbers 1 and 2. So we need to fold back the paper. 1 is staying down because we have already done that fabric. And I'm bringing the paper back to the sew line between 1 and 2. I need to cut that fabric down to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm folding back the foundation fabric, and now I'm going to cut the fabric to a 1/4 inch. I have this add a quarter ruler, which is great because it's got a lip on it and you just hold it up against the paper and it stops the ruler from moving. But you could use a regular ruler, just cut it down to a 1/4 inch. Bring the foundation fabric back flat, and now we need to get the second fabric. I can see that the shape is just a straight block, so I'm just going to put the fabric right sides facing down and line it up with that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to sew that seam. I've got my needle set at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I've got my stitch length at 1.0. We want teeny tiny stitches so that they don't come undone. We don't back stitch on any of these seams. Flick the pattern back and I can see that number 2 is covered. Give that a really good press to stick the paper pattern back down. Now I need to sew on the line between 2 and 3. So I'm going to use my ruler just to make sure that that crease is good, even though I've already creased it once. And then we're going to repeat the same as we did with the previous one. Fold the foundation fabric back and cut the fabric down to 1/4 inch seam allowance. And get fabric number 3 and put that right sides together, and we're just going to sew that seam between 2 and 3. I've come across a problem where I've sewn the seam too long and I can't cut back to 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can leave the fabric as it is, but you will be getting extra bulk. I prefer to cut it back, so I'm going to cut back a few stitches without cutting the foundation fabric. I'm going to draw 1/4 inch seam allowance onto the fabric. And now I can see that my foundation fabric is actually out of the way when I fold it back, so I can use a rotary cutter. You can use scissors if you prefer. First thing I'm going to do is mark where those seams start and end, and I can see through the paper. I'm just going to bring that measurement down and put it onto the foundation fabric. I started a couple of stitches before and finished a couple of stitches after those marked lines. Continue with these steps, folding, cutting, sewing, pressing all the way through until all of the numbers on the block have been sewn. So now for the big reveal. Uh-oh. Oh my gosh. Oh wow, look at that. That is just so cute and adorable. And that is a 1.5 inch finished block. So that's my way of using foundation fabric and foundation piecing on a tiny block. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'm going to use these. I have a project planned for these blocks, so hopefully you can follow along with that tutorial. And this pattern is reusable. You can just use it all over again. We haven't sewn on it, we haven't ripped it, we haven't done anything. So just use it again. That's the best part.